Hello and welcome back to the Audible finish in the brand new year of 2024. I'm your host, Dimitri Kalos, and alongside me, as always, is my esteemed co-host, Thanasi. Hello, Thanasi.
Salutations and peace. This is great to be here on the podcast for the first 2024 podcast recording.
As our regular listeners will know, this is our show where we discuss the week gone by in the world of wrestling. And in this week's episode, we review the events from AEW Worlds End, including Samoa Joe's shock knockout win over MJF to become the new AEW World Champion, and the reveal of Adam Cole as the Devil. Later on, we'll also talk about what happened in WWE, including the Day One edition of Raw, which saw Seth Rollins and Drew McIntyre battle it out for the World Heavyweight Championship. We will close this episode with our predictions for 2024, including our opinion on if Roman Reigns will lose the title this year. We will discuss that and more later on. If you are enjoying the podcast and have a moment, please like, share, and subscribe. On that note, Thanasi, let's get into our AEW Worlds End review. Now, before we discuss the show, would it be fair to say that this was one of two halves for you?
I guess you could think of it that way. I think another way that I'm thinking about it is more that it was tension was increasing throughout the night, more of a New Japan style structure of a pay-per-view as opposed to the American style where you put in P-break matches in between the semi-main and the main.
Oh, well, on that note, let's get into it because you raise a great point there because the first match of the night was one that was announced, I think, on the day, and that was essentially just a Continental Classic losers match where they had the faces and the heels from the tournament go head to head in an 8-man tag team match, which the faces eventually won. But all I could think about watching this was why?
Huh.
Why did it need to be here? It's not like the card needed extra matches. It already had 8. And I just felt like not the wrestler's fault. It was a fine match, but it just felt like a bad way to start a pay-per-view because there was no energy behind it.
I think from my side that you couldn't stop thinking why. I couldn't stop thinking house show, house show, house show. Like this is exactly how you would structure again, like a very New Japan style house show where you put some big talent all together in a multi-man tag. But it just didn't really feel like this needed to be there. Like you could have just left them off the card, frankly. Like not everyone needs to be on your card necessarily.
Couldn't agree more. Following that, we did have a singles match between Miro and Andrade El Idolo, who had CJ Perry in his corner. The match, how did you think it fared, Thanasu?
Look, I mean, we had that nice superplex spot that produced the yells from CJ. And then we had the cool figure four versus the Redeemer submission tit for tat, right? So there was some good stuff here. But overall, it was a fairly standard match before that figure four spot where CJ illegally broke the hold. And that was the one that actually frees it up for that Machka kick and the final lock in of the Redeemer lock or the camel clutch that Miro has. And does beg the question now, is Andrade gone? Has he just put it over a colleague on his way out? That's what I'm wondering.
Well, if he is on the way out, then fair play to him. This was a good way to end his tenure with AEW, which, if he is gone, I think it's fair to say it has felt lackluster and certainly not what fans anticipated when he did show up. And let's hope that wherever he does turn up, that he is able to show more of his abilities and to fruitful results. Following that, we had our first title match of the evening, and that was Timeless Tony Storm versus Riho for the AEW Women's World Championship. Then I say, I'm not going to lie, I didn't really have much notes on this, but I will say I think the correct booking prevailed in Tony Storm retaining the title. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I think that's true. I mean, they did have a real red hot go at producing a story out of this, which was the size difference. Where, I mean, Riho has a very, very small physique. And it's one of the few instances where Tony Storm does have that very significant advantage over an opponent. So she was using the body slams, she was using the back stomps. She even jumped into the electric chair onto Luther to throw Riho off the apron and then onto the outside area. So there was that cool spot. Did you notice that Riho actually hit a 619 and a crossbody and a body slam of her own?
I did indeed.
So that was, I think that was a little bit of a parallel, the biggest little man sort of thing, or the biggest little woman, Rey Mysterio parallel there. So I thought their storytelling was good in all. Of course, Tony Storm's Storm Zero wasn't even enough, but it took an unorthodox ragdoll DDT to get her enough to retain the strap. So the story of the night was that Riho really did put up a fight in spite of the power imbalance there.
After that match, we had Swerve Strickland face not Keith Lee, because unfortunately he had to pull out due to an injury, but his tag team partner, Dustin Rhodes. And honestly, this was a weird match for me because, and I will elaborate what I mean. There was a pretty much beatdown on Dustin Rhodes where Swerve Strickland stomped on his foot when it was rested on top of a cinder block. And I thought, okay, that's good because he's still meant to be a fighter, a scrapper, but also a heel at heart. Swerve, he's out for himself. So I thought that was fine. And I even didn't mind Dustin heroically rather still wrestling the match. But they went close to 10 minutes. And by the end of it, it felt like it didn't matter. And I bring this up as well because Swerve just beat him using his normal combination. And I thought, well, when an injured limb is at stake, win the match via an attack on the injured limb. You might as well exploit that fact and be a bit unique. So I just felt like the match was, it just felt like it went a bit longer than it should have based on the way they set it up. Is that fair to say?
Look, I think that's fair enough. And I assume they didn't have a lot of time to put this match together, to be
Mm.
honest with you. It was more just a way to give Swerve some kind of a big victory at the end of the year, which I assume was already planned against Keith Lee before he guns for gold in 2024. And he did make that belt around the waist gesture as he was heading back up the ramp post match.
Yeah, and perhaps his name will come up later on in some of our predictions.
Mm.
Okay, well, following that, we had the other eight-man tag team match. Um, I don't know why we needed two on the one card, but that's okay. This was Ricky Starks, Big Bill, and the Don Callis family members, Konosuke Takeshita and Powerhouse Hobbs, versus Chris Jericho, Sammy Guevara, Sting, and Darby Allin. That's it. The match I thought was serviceable and it did its job. And if there wasn't another eight-man tag match on the card, I think it would have felt really refreshing compared to all the other action we were getting. But I just wanted to quickly note, I don't know if I heard this wrong, but did it feel like people were booing Chris Jericho at times during this match to you?
I wasn't so much hearing the boos with Chris Jericho, but on social media it did kind of pan out because there were people making reference to the NDA disclosure. There was a little bit of go away heat, and I'm kind of surprised to be honest about it. But perhaps this is just like a thing of the local New York crowd. I mean, he was born in New York, but he's really a Canadian. Who knows?
Yeah, I thought it was a bit odd. Oh, I say odd. I mean, obviously there is the ongoing issues going with Chris Jericho. Apparently, he's been alleged to have potentially sexually harassed the past AEW worker. We obviously
Mhm.
don't have any details on that, so we're not going to comment any further. But I just thought with it just felt like that in combination with the Kenny Omega drama and everything, it just feels like this whole story has been very messy, and that they really had to go to extra lengths to try and just get some semblance of a match set up here. All right. Well, after that, we had Julia Hart versus Abaddon for the AEW TBS Championship. And in this match, Julia Hart sort of got some aid from her new uh, partner of sorts in Sky Blue, who interfered, and it led to a bit of a fight between her and Abaddon behind the ref's back. So no DQ called there. And I just wanted to quickly mention that Julia Hart won the match with her moonsault, but it was a bit overshot, I think. It felt like the placement wasn't quite there, but importantly, she retains the title, which I think was the right call. And this, I feel, this sort of puts a feather in the bow of the this little mini feud between these two competitors. Is that fair enough?
I think that's fair enough. We didn't really expect much in the feud with Abaddon anyway. It just seemed like a transitional number one contender.
And she did her job, and
Yeah.
they did their job to try and get the pronouns correct. All right, well, Vanessa, I think it's fair to say that from here on in, we actually got an interesting pay-per-view. And it felt like this is when things really start to kick off. And that was Christian Cage versus Adam Copeland in a no disqualification match for the AEW TNT Championship. Then I say there were so many moments in this match. Do you want to shed some light on some of the ones that really tickled your fancy?
Well, first of all, as soon as Adam Copeland walked out, you'll have noticed that he was wearing his WrestleMania 22 gear with the gray pants and the vest. So that was foreshadowing the flaming table spot for anyone who didn't know it was coming. Copeland, of course, had an interesting spot early on in the match where he dived off the second tier of the seating down onto Cage into the crowd. And in response, Cage hit a sunset flip powerbomb off the top of a ladder. So another homage, this one also to the past, to their ladder match days when they were a tag team. Copeland also gets a big spear through the corner table to evoke a big pop from the crowd. And then close to the finish of this match, Wayne and Christian Cage begin to squirt lighter fluid on a table that's set up on the outside. Copeland seizes control, squirts more of the lighter fluid, and then power bombs Nick Wayne onto it after lighting it on fire. But his ass just grazes the back of it. He actually falls directly onto the floor. So when he's writhing around and his mother's trying to help him out, he's more just grabbing his behind. Of course, the fire did come out because the table got flipped over, so it cut off all the oxygen. In any case, back in the ring, Copeland hits kill switch on Christian Cage, not the spear, in order to become champion. And then Dimitri, kill switch arrives. The former Luchasaurus kill switch, that is, you're right. Yep. He obliterates Adam Copeland and he surrenders his earned contract for the TNT title match to his patriarch, Christian Cage, and he won this on the pre-show, I believe. There was like a battle royal.
That's correct. That's correct.
So Cage is able to cash in instead. And just like his former best friend, former brother, hit his finishing move, he does the same. He regains the TNT title with a spear, becoming champion once again. Did you have any reflections on the booking decision here?
I think I'm kind of in two minds on it because on the one hand, I feel like it really fits perfectly with Christian's character right now to do this sort of thing. But on the other hand, I don't like interrupted title reigns that much. I prefer to just have the stretch, and once you want to put it on someone else, you give it. And so in that sense, there will always be that moment in history that says Christian lost it at X amount of days and then won it again, and that will just sort of divide it. It's worth mentioning this is Edge's first title in wrestling, I think, in 12 years since he had to give up the World Heavyweight Championship back in 2011. So I think that there is something to be said that it's a powerful moment that just when he's finally got gold again, that's taken away from him just as quickly. From the man that first cashed in the Money in the Bank to win gold very easily on a weakened opponent. So I'm kind of in two minds, but I think overall that the match was very good and it felt like two brothers in disarray just going at it and sort of taking out all their frustrations against each other, which was perfect. And I loved the homage to the flaming table. And I'll give a quick shout out to Excalibur, who had a great line on commentary where he says that they're putting a Homer Simpson-esque amount of lighter fluid on the table, which got a bit of a pop out of me. So overall, I think it was a good match and did its job. Following that, we had the Continental Classic Championship final, and this was to crown the inaugural Triple Crown Championship with the ROH World Championship, the NJPW Strong Openweight Championship, and the inaugural AEW Continental Championship. This obviously saw Eddie Kingston go up against Jon Moxley, the two winners from the Blue and Gold Leagues, respectively. And I just wanted to quickly mention some moments where, and this really got me to cringe, I'm not going to lie, when Eddie Kingston went for a suicide dive and he kind of overshot it and he just sort of dove straight into the straight into the barricade area, and it looked awkward, but he got up fairly quickly, so he clearly seems to be okay. But it almost for a moment looked like he was going to spike himself in the direct corner between the floor and the barricade, and
It did look dangerous, and it seemed as if he actually got the worst of it rather than
hmm,
Mox, his opponent.
yeah. But aside from that, they did some good work together. There was a paradigm shift on the outside, chops galore. There was a spinning back fist at one point. Then there was a nice spot where Eddie Kingston delivered his machine gun chops in the corner, and he said, "You want 100%, mother lover?" He had hit two Northern Lights bombs during the match, both times getting a 2 count. There was a bulldog choke put on Eddie Kingston, and there was an arm drop check. And I was directly noting this down because I wanted to see what would happen if it would later on in the matches, and I'll bring that point up in the main event. But obviously, he kept his arm up before the third drop could happen. Then the finish saw a headbutt exchange between the two, and then a slap exchange, and then just a sudden spinning back fist out of nowhere, which was enough to give Eddie Kingston the win. And he is the inaugural Triple Crown champion. And I think this was the right call. And quite frankly, this was my match of the night. I think this was probably my favorite based on everything, and it felt like it did everything it needed to simply, and it had the right outcome, and there was no external uh, concern with how it played out. Whereas the other two matches do have a little bit of just they have a little bit of action that sort of splits and divides the wrestling fandom. But I think in this case, Eddie Kingston won it fairly, and the two hugged. So it's fairly nice. Any other thoughts you want to add to this, Thanos?
Oh, look, I mean, this is just a big deal for Eddie Kingston, right? He's a champion across three different promotions. He's joining a very elite list of wrestlers. So good for him. And I mean, like you said, this was what we were expecting. We were expecting Eddie to get the win. And I think the storytelling of the match was very consistent with both their characters. Neither of them is technical, they're much more gritty. And that's exactly what the match was like.
Well, Thanase, this leads us into the main event of AEW Worlds End, and that was MJF versus Samoa Joe for the AEW World Championship. And I have to say, right off the bat, when Adam Cole's music hit and he came out to be in Max's corner, I started getting very, very suspicious. Was that the same for you?
Oh yeah, very much so. Like you can see the second he comes out, it's like, oh, things are getting cooking here. He's there for all the big moments. And here he is for the big East Coast versus West Coast clash.
Well, in the match, MJF had his left shoulder, I believe, taped up. So obviously he's been working with a lot of pain, especially in the last 6 months of his title
Mm-hmm,
reign.
mm-hmm.
But during the match, at one point he evades the Muscle Buster initially, and at one point he tries to attempt the Shawn Michaels rope trick where he bounces back up. But as he's mid uh, that maneuver and he's upside down, Joe drop kicks him, which was I quite liked, I must say. And he follows it up with a muscle buster on the ring apron, which just looked amazing. But my God, I hope Max is okay after that. And that only got a 2 count, amazingly. I wouldn't mind seeing that maneuver used as like a match ender in the future because it looks pretty good. Max hits a heat seeker for a 2, and he attempts a second one, but this is countered by Samoa Joe. And then there is the classic ref bump during a world title match. MJF hits a low blow, and then amazingly hits an F5 on Samoa Joe, which I just want to quickly highlight. That is amazing.
That's fantastic strength game. I mean, if this were John Cena, the commentators would be going absolutely ballistic for it. But I think just looking at it as a mere fact, as a fan, you can admire the strength and the sheer feat of power that MJF showed us here.
And the thing that I find remarkable is, at least from the fans and the viewers' point of view, it didn't look like he was struggling either. It looked like he was fairly stable, like he had it under control the whole
He
time.
was fairly stable. I was looking at his legs; they were a little bit shaky, But I mean, MJF is significantly smaller than Samoa Joe in size. So a little because, mind you, he didn't just hit the F5 on the spot. He picked him up in the corner into the fireman's carry and then came to the center of the ring in order to deliver the F5.
Well, that only got him a two, but that was a labored referee pin. So obviously, they're sort of protecting all the competitors involved after that spot. MJF then goes to Cole asking for the ring, and Cole kind of fumbles around for it. And I thought, okay, well, they're not doing anything to alleviate my concerns about Adam Cole's trust here. But eventually, he does find it. He gives it to MJF, but before he can use it, Joe locks in his Coquina clutch, cinches it in, and they do an arm drop check on MJF. Once it falls down, twice it falls down, and then three times it falls down. And it felt like the entire arena, including the referee, were did not know what to do. But the ref eventually gets to his senses and says, "Oh well, that's it. The match is over.
Yep.
Joe wins via knockout." And I have to say, I like that at least for the evening, it was consistent. They didn't do an arm tap to see knockout. They did the drop. I thought, yes, perfect. And obviously, some people are a bit surprised and perhaps didn't want Joe to be the one to eventually dethrone MJF. But I have to be honest, I'm very excited about this proposition. And I especially like that MJF dropped the title before January of 2024, which is his supposed AEW contract expiry. So it really does lend into that story. Honestly, overall, what did you think of the match? How do you feel about the new champion being Samoa Joe?
Look, as soon as you see him locking the Coquina clutch, my initial reaction was that MJF is going to break out because it was the first instance of him locking in the clutch. And as soon as that third hand dropped, I actually thought initially that it was going to be a false finish.
Mm.
I thought because MJF in his hand, and I thought it was the hand that the referee was lifting up and down. He was holding the diamond ring that Adam Cole had fed to him. So I thought that it was going to be declared a DQ finish as a result of the third lift. However, let's be very clear. How awesome is it for Samoa Joe to be world champion again? It's beautiful because he's been a world champion across TNA, Ring of Honor, AEW, and if you count the NXT title in WWE as well, that's four different promotions. So massive props to him. And it really shows the level of trust that the promotion has in Samoa Joe. And certainly a big reward for being such a consistent heel and a fantastic character on television the last half year or so. I do think he might be a transitional champion, but nevertheless, his reign is well deserved.
Well, that wasn't it, because the show closed with the devil and his goons coming out. And it was interesting because they attacked the two brochachos at first, and one of the goons feigns interest in hitting MJF with the chair, but Adam Cole pleads to him to hit him instead. They both sort of get in a screaming match as to who the goon should attack with the chair when the lights go out. And when they come back on, the chair is no longer in the goon's hand. It is on set up in the middle of the ring with Adam Cole sitting on it. And the four goons reveal themselves as Roderick Strong, Mike Bennett, Matt Taven, and Wardlow. Of course, with the ringleader sitting right in front of them. Adam Cole is the devil. Then I see people online have sort of said it was too predictable and they were kind of wanting something else out of it. I think this was a situation in which no one would have been unanimously happy. And I truly think Adam Cole is the right choice.
He is
Predictable, yes.
100% the right choice. He's the only one that makes sense to bring the whole story full circle. He's been here the longest. All the little Easter eggs have been sown the whole way through. This is the perfect. I don't understand how anyone can be so narrow-minded as to think that no, this was the wrong call. This was absolutely the right call. Predictable, perhaps, but like I've said before on the show, sometimes the predictable choice is the right one because it makes sense. There's a logic to it. You're going to get to a bit later on the Dynamite review, but I think every one of his goons makes sense as well. Wardlow is the only one that's there as kind of like a bit of a grudge against MJF, but everyone there is super tight with Adam Cole. It's the Kingdom, so everything really checks out. I don't have anything to complain about here.
I agree. And you know what? I'm happy to keep this discussion going because Dynamite this week opened with Adam Cole and his new faction mates coming out. So Adam Cole delivers an explanation of sorts, and he says, firstly, he did it before MJF would have. He feels that it was a matter of time before one of them was going to do it, so he just beat him to the punch. He then sort of elaborates and says that MJF needed Adam Cole, whereas Adam Cole did not need MJF. And he proclaims himself and his faction mates as the Undisputed Kingdom. Says that they're all about winning championship gold, with Matt Taven, Mike Bennett already the Ring of Honor tag team champions. Roderick Strong's going to go after the international championship, and Wardlow is going after the world championship. And he says at this point that when the timing is right and he has healed, that Wardlow will forfeit the title to Adam Cole, which, I mean, I don't buy, but, at least for now, yep, go for it. Good on your champ. We'll see how it plays out. What did you think of this explanation segment from Adam Cole?
I think what I would have liked to have a bit more emphasis there is something that's a bit more believable as it pertains to Wardlow. And that is as simple as he's a gun for hire. He just hates MJF. He's not loyal to Adam Cole. Like this idea, oh, he's going to hand over the belt to me. Like, just send him after the TNT title to begin with, and have Adam Cole go after the world title, right? Like fulfill a prophecy, like all the belts, just like the Undisputed Era. And I have another thought here. Is there a reason we're calling it the Undisputed Kingdom? And the reason I bring this up is because Roddy Strong was in the OG Kingdom in Ring of Honor, wasn't he?
Yeah.
Just like with Mike Bennett and with Matt Taven. So the four of them already constitute part of the kingdom. So the addition of Wardlow doesn't make it undisputed because that's a reference to NXT.
I think Undisputed is purely a reference to Adam Cole. It's the group that, whether people like it or not, it's probably now the most associated with him from his career. And that's probably just why it's just him saying, it's my kingdom, if that makes sense. It's like the easiest way to say it, it's my kingdom.
But he was already part of the original kingdom.
That is true.
So in any case, maybe this is just like the new strand. Like we've got Bullet Club Gold. This is Kingdom Undisputed, something like that.
Yeah.
Nevertheless, I am very, very pleased with the direction of this storyline. I want them to keep going now because with the absence of MJF, we're going to be losing a main event talent from television. Samoa Joe did not appear live for the audience. He was in a backstage segment only, I believe. So we've got to keep this momentum going, constantly have main event talent coming, put people in segments that progress storylines. Like let's get the ball rolling properly here.
And it's worth mentioning as well that before this segment closed, Bullet Club Gold's Jay White emerged and sort of, who, as many people will remember, is actually the first victim of the devil and his goons, sort of comes out saying, that he wants a bit of vengeance. He doesn't fault them for attacking Max, but there has to be some retribution for what they did to him. And he says, I've got mates of my own, essentially, with the guns coming out to his aid. Bullet Club Gold emerges, and then the Acclaimed also run out. So it seems like there's going to be a bit of faction warfare in the meantime, while there's this vengeance being carried out and enacted between all these different teams, which I'm excited for. It gives them something to do in the meantime. It's worth mentioning as well that the show featured matches like Orange Cassidy versus Dante Martin for the AEW International Championship, which Orange Cassidy successfully defended. And afterwards, Private Party actually came out together and sort of put the tag scene on notice that they're back, they're here, and they want the titles. Mariah May, your favorite, Thanasir, had her AEW debut against Queen Aminata, and she won. And this was followed by Deonna Purrazzo debuting in AEW officially. So it seems like this, as it is the new year, it felt like this was a refresh leading AEW into 2024. It did feel that way.
Certainly.
But one act from 2023 that is not going away is Christian Cage. He had an in-ring interview segment with Tony Schiavone along with all the members of his patriarchy. He thanks Mother Wayne and he thanks Nick Wayne for their efforts at World's End, and then finally reserves the final thanks for the man most responsible for the win, and that is not Kill Switch, but rather himself. So a very vain Christian Cage coming out here, and he proclaims them as the faces of AEW now and forever. Following that, we had Darby Allin versus Konosuke Takeshita, which Takeshita won. So a very high-profile match for just an ordinary episode of Dynamite, but I guess that's what AEW does sometimes. They give you these little moments. And this was followed by a four-way number one contenders match for the Continental Crown Championship between Trent Beretta, Brian Cage, Brian Keith, and El Higo del Vikingo, which was won by Trent Beretta. So that's setting up a match on Collision. And the show closed with Swerve Strickland versus Daniel Garcia, with Strickland getting the win here. And post-match, there was a Swerve and Adam Page brawl, and the two competitors had to be separated by security. Then I say, are you a bit perplexed about the interaction between these two again after what was already a very satisfying end to their match, to their feud?
Slightly, no, I would say so, and especially with the result from World's End, it just simply looks like the right way for Swerve to go is up, and that means up in the card towards the main event, and I mean the world title. I don't understand the Hangman Adam Page thing. Is it possible that whoever was supposed to go with Hangman next, maybe like a Keith Lee, has suffered an injury, so he's got to do something? I don't know. Maybe this is just like a one-off. Like let's make it a means to an end, like a tag match or something like that. It is a bit strange though.
Well, that closed Dynamite, the maiden 2024 episode of Dynamite. So let's now move on to WWE. And we would normally start with SmackDown, but it was a recap show, so I feel like we don't really need to waste our breath on it. Is that
Nothing
fair
to
to say,
say.
Thanasi?
Yeah.
So let's just go straight into Raw Day One. And Raw Day One opened with Becky Lynch versus Nia Jax. And Nia Jax got the win here, which I thought was surprising, but probably the right call for now. Becky Lynch is a mainstay in the eyes of the fans, so she can take these sorts of losses. But in the meantime, they really do elevate people like Nia Jax. This was followed by Cody coming out for a promo, and he sort of requests a match right then and there to end his beef with Shinsuke Nakamura. But Nakamura appears on the Titantron and announces they will fight next week. He's giving him one more week to really prepare for him. This was then followed by Kofi Kingston and Jey Uso versus Imperium. But the match unfortunately had to stop prematurely due to referee stoppage following an injury to Giovanni Vinci. Obviously, we wish Vinci the best and hope that it's nothing too serious. We'll wait to see what's going on that front. We then had a Miz TV segment that was supposedly with the Judgment Day, but it turned out to be with R-Truth, who I guess is in the Judgment Day in his mind. And it led into a tag match between R-Truth and The Miz versus Dominic Mysterio and JD McDonough, which was won by Awesome Truth. So I'm a bit displeased with how JD McDonough is being booked right now. He's sort of just been made into a laughing stock. I'd hope that that can change a little bit in the future because we want the Judgment Day to still maintain its street cred. This was followed by, speaking of street cred in the Judgment Day, this was followed by Rhea Ripley defending her Women's World Championship against Ivy Nile successfully. And then we had a segment here, which was the return of a former WWE champion. And of course, our favorite WWE champion of all time came out, Jinder Mahal. He delivered an anti-America rant. And in reply, another WWE former champion came out, just a small guy going by the name of The Rock. He shockingly showed up, said that they boo him not because he is different, but because he is an asshole.
Can I just say this? And this is absolutely not a critique or a criticism on The Rock, because it's something a lot of baby faces do. They try they're apologists for the crowd's racism by saying, no, the crowd is not chanting against you because you are different. But the thing is, the crowd very clearly is booing the foreigner. Like it's quite clear that that's what's happening, and it's quite clear that WWE books it as such. So Jinder Mahal going very well into this role of the foreigner because speaking in Punjabi during his promo. But I do just want to make that point clear that we don't absolve the crowd's racism just with uh, one flick of the hand, like The Rock tries to do.
In any case, from an actual critical standpoint, the Rock sort of repeated what he did with Austin Theory back in SmackDown last year, which was the getting the chants going on in the arena, one half chanting something, the other half chanting the other, which I thought was a bit like, okay, like if you're going to show up, we can, let's experiment a bit, let's not just repeat ourselves. But he closes the show after having beaten Jinder Mahal with the brawl, finishing with the people's elbow. He says he's feeling hungry, and I can certainly relate. There are very few moments in the day when I'm not also feeling hungry, and he asks what he should do, and he's sort of saying, "Should I eat here? Should I eat at a bar?" And then he finishes, and he goes, "Or should I eat at the head of the table?" And this made the arena collectively pop.
Erupt.
I hope this is not the WrestleMania plan. I think a lot of the wrestling fans would be very disappointed if that was the case because one of two things happens. Either The Rock beats Roman Reigns and that wastes what has been a 3.5 year story really on a guy that doesn't need it, or he beats The Rock and it kind of feels like we're going a whole nother year before we get another shot at Roman dropping the title. Uh, am I being pessimistic or is that fair to say, Thanasis?
No, you've described exactly what I would have thought. And frankly, in a Vince world, I would not have ruled out the possibility of The Rock going over and being the one to dethrone Roman Reigns. If I can be a bit of a party pooper though, because I think we try to be quite realistic on the channel, we don't try to clickbait. When I was scrolling through my news feed on the day, I was out. I wasn't at home when this was a live broadcast, and I saw that WWE immediately uploaded a clip of The Rock having that last three lines there, saying he's going to eat at the seat at the head of the table, but the caption there was The Rock calls out Roman Reigns. Now, it wasn't exactly clickbait because the only thing you could do was watch the video that was already there in front of you, but it wasn't really calling him out. And I think that just it's a little bit of overhype on this one, right? Like, unless we know that The Rock is trying to get into ring shape, yes, he looks fantastic, but given that the SAG strike is over, I'm skeptical to see this actually happening. I think it was just there as a as let's get everyone talking sort of thing, right? So I don't really see that happening. Did you have a comment?
Well, the only comment I wanted to add is I was looking into it, and apparently there are reports that the Perth government of all places are actually pushing and lobbying really hard for The Rock to appear at Elimination Chamber. Now, if that's the case, I'm on board because you know what? Get him to Australia, get the moment, and there's no chance in hell Roman Reigns is dropping the title in Perth for Elimination Chamber. So it's just like a nice moment where let them have this match that a lot of people would like to see. I'm kind of indifferent. I guess I would like to see it, but I don't really care if it happens or not. But let that moment happen, and you know what? Do it in front of 60,000 people in Optus Stadium.
Yeah, look, I mean, it's a little bit of rent seeking, but I think any invested stakeholder would want The Rock there, right? I mean, even at WrestleMania, yes, you and I and all the wrestling fans would say, under no circumstances should The Rock be the one going over and taking the belt off of Roman. But there's a lot of money to be made of such a decision. So WWE, of course, is above everything else a business, not a sport company. So they would seriously consider doing something like that if the price were right. That being said, I think I read some weird trolls on social media saying that The Rock would be involved in Roman dropping the belt at Elimination Chamber in order to set up their non-title match at WrestleMania. and then Cody versus Randy Orton would be the plan for the Universal title at WrestleMania. As a match, I actually much prefer that. I don't want The Rock and Roman in the main event. I don't want either of them in the main event. And I would love Cody and Randy Orton to be in the main event of WrestleMania. I think that would be fantastic. But I don't see that being likely. That's the thing here.
Yeah, that to me feels a lot like fantasy booking, to be honest, of trying to make the situation like fulfill as many satisfying conclusions as possible.
Yeah.
But all we can do is wait and see how it's gonna transpire. But in the meantime, I'll just quickly round up Raw as well. So after that, we had Shayna Baszler and Zoe Stark beat Natalia and Tegan Nox. And then we had the main event, which was Seth Rollins versus Drew McIntyre for the World Heavyweight Championship. And it had a very frantic conclusion, this match, which saw Damian Priest sort of come out to try and cash in. And he clocked Rollins with the briefcase to sort of set him up perfectly for the cash in. But before he can actually give it in, he's claymored by Drew McIntyre. Drew then belly to belly suplexes Dominic, who had come out with Damian Priest, goes into the ring, claymores Seth Rollins, and extends his leg so far in the pin attempt that his foot just rests on the bottom rope, which I really liked because it almost feels like in the previous Crown Jewel match, he was talking about how he didn't want it enough. He didn't have the killer's edge. And this time it seems like he was so invested that he didn't have the calm to actually do it properly. Like he was so in the moment that he wasn't thinking about his surroundings any further after finally getting the Claymore in. And because of obviously his foot being on the bottom rope, the pin didn't go to 3. Rollins then pedigreed Drew on the announce table and curb stomped him in the ring to retain. But I say, what did you think of this main event for Raw Day One?
I actually have a different opinion to offer here. Since this was on New Year's Day, I actually would have liked for this match to open the show because I think that if it's a New Year's episode, you start off super, super fresh. And I think in 2011, they had done this exact thing. They set up, The Miz was the world champion at the time, and they put him in a match against John Morrison in Falls Count Anywhere. Now, of course, the champion retained. I'm not saying to go quite that far and have a title change, but I think it would be great to, have this as a kind of tradition where it's like the first match on Raw of the new year is a massive, massive marquee match. You just like as soon as the fans tune in, they get a big match right there on television.
I think I would have been interested to see it that way as well. But in any case, Rollins retains. It feels like he's very much on the road to WrestleMania. Uh, we don't know yet who he will face, but we might get a sneak preview of what I think is going to happen in our next segment on the episode, which is the 2024 predictions that we have worked on. And we've done them under certain categories. And the first one we're going to discuss is Maiden World Champions. So obviously there are many world championships in AEW and WWE across the women's and the men's divisions. And what we're going to do now is sort of give our predictions on who we think will be maiden world champions for each of those titles. And to
So
start off
basically,
with,
who's going to win their first world title in 2024?
essentially, and to start off with, we're going to go with the AEW Women's World Championship. And it's a bit of a dark horse, I'll admit, but I've got your favorite, Mariah May, for this one.
I was actually going to say the same thing.
Oh,
I think that this would be now, like, obviously, I want to hear you out because I think our logic is going to be very similar. But I also want to say to our listeners to hear us out on this logic. Do you want to go first?
well, I'll tell you my logic and we'll see if you agree.
Yeah.
I really like what they're doing with Tony Storm. And there is a tried and tested formula in wrestling, which is the apprentice working with the champion and slowly the champion growing jealous of what the apprentice is accomplishing. And I think that eventually the two are going to butt heads. There might be a similar storyline to the Trish Stratus and Mickey James saga, and that eventually Mariah May is going to actually overcome her mentor. Uh, I'm yet to really think about who would be the face in this scenario, but I just see this happening eventually. We're talking about down the line in the year, like not right now, probably at least 6 months down, but potentially at All In.
Yeah, yeah. Actually, that's a very good shout because she is from London. I think that's a really good shout. My logic is I wasn't thinking so much about the mentor and apprentice. I was thinking more of the stalker storyline. I thought it would be a modern rehash of the Trish Stratus and Mickey James, where it's kind of like that scorned, unrequited appreciation, perhaps not obsessive love kind of levels, but certainly I think that that's a really natural direction that you can take this in if you book it correctly. And indeed, if Mariah May does end up being a massive support in Tony retaining the strap in the next 6 months or the next half year or so, that making her a contender for her maiden world title would be a pretty awesome moment for her.
Well, let's go on to the other AEW World title, and that is the World Championship held by the men. And I'm going really ballsy here because I'm saying for the price of one, three names. Because I have a suspicion this year the AEW men's title is going to be a little bit hot potatoed. Not too much, but I think we're going to get a lot of fresh champions this year. So I've written one name that I think you will agree with, which is Swerve Strickland. I've written another name, which is a bit of a rogue shout, but Wardlow. And I've written a third name that I think by the end of the year will be the champion as well, and that is Will Ospreay.
Mm, okay. Why don't you walk us, because I agree with you on Swerve Strickland, why don't you walk us through Wardlow and Will Ospreay?
I think Will Ospreay I'll leave last because I think there is something to be said there. Wardlow is a bit of a rogue shot, but I think that because he's such a powerhouse, that they're going to give him that moment where he has the title and that potentially could lead down the line into the story with Adam Cole or
Mhm.
with a returning MJF. But I just have a suspicion that because he's set his sights on that and he's vocalized it so much, that he's really going to go on he's going to go on a tear and eventually get to that spot. Potentially even be the one that beats Samoa Joe because those two have some prior
Mm,
beef. And that's just the my thought on that. With Will Ospreay, I think he's such a high profile name. Cash in while it's hot. So,
okay.
and I think give him the moment at All In London, have him main event, potentially against a guy like Swerve Strickland, tear the house down and give him that huge moment in front of his countrymen.
I think that one I can see happening, and perhaps that's a good segue now to how Swerve gets the strap. I actually think my personal prediction, based off this past Dynamite episode and the pay-per-view result, that Swerve Strickland is going to be world champion very, very soon. Like in contrast with Mariah May, where we're talking about 6 months down the line, I think in this case, that as soon as Revolution, potentially even TV, to be honest with you, that Swerve is going to be putting, well, Samoa Joe to sleep, frankly, and becoming the first African American, the first Black world champion in AEW. So I think that that's where we're heading. I think actually it would be a fantastic idea for him to go up against Will Ospreay at All In. I actually think that, well, I'm not sure about Wardlow to be honest, but I don't think 2024 is going to be a hot potato year purely because AEW does prefer to do, in general, longer title reigns as opposed to the WWE's 1 or 2 month strategy.
Let's go now to the WWE side of things, and I want to start with the WWE Women's Championship. And I think Bailey is going to win her first WWE Women's Championship of this new iteration to
Mm.
overtake and to sort of get into that beef with Io Sky.
I could see that happening. I was actually going to be, I was finding this one very hard, and I was actually going to say that this year, at least for the women's title, obviously you're following a slightly different logic to what I am. I don't think we're going to have women's a new women's maiden champion. I think that all the champions of this year will be former champions as well. It's kind of like the prediction that Stan Wawrinka had in 2020 or something, I think it was, where they were asking who's going to win their first Grand Slam this year. And he said, no one. It's going to be the big three winning all four of them. Let's stop kidding ourselves. So that's my prediction on that one.
Okay, well, I'm very interested by that because I have something. along those lines, but slightly different with the Women's World Championship, which is I don't think Rhea Ripley's dropping it. I don't think
Oh,
this.
okay.
I think she's holding it all year round.
It's not going to go to Becky at WrestleMania, you don't think?
I think it could, but it's just that with how I think WrestleMania is going to pan out, they don't like doing a complete change of champions on
Indeed.
over the board.
Indeed.
They like to
Yes.
have some carryover, and I think
Yep.
Rhea Ripley is going to be the one that does.
Okay. Yeah, I can see that happening, and I'd be on board with that, frankly, because she's going to be coming hot off the Perth pay-per-view. So having her win at WrestleMania and then potentially have it the remainder of the year really cements her as an absolute star.
Then we move on to the World Heavyweight Championship. And I have one who is a completely fresh world champion,
Mhm.
and I have one who is going to win, I believe, his maiden title of this iteration of the World Heavyweight Championship. So the slightly cop-out answer for me is CM Punk. I think he's going to win it, but I also think that another man to win it is going to be the current Money in the Bank holder,
Yep.
Damian Priest.
Absolutely. I actually agree with that. That was going to be my prediction for it. And obviously, it's a very logical conclusion to make, isn't it? He's holding the Money in the Bank contract. We expect him to take the World Heavyweight title as opposed to the Universal Championship. And because he has to win it sometime before the Money in the Bank pay-per-view in the middle of the year. So everything looks to be quite logical there. We're going to be seeing him with the world title around his waist sometime this year.
And this leads us into the final world championship to discuss, and that is the WWE Universal Championship, currently held by Roman Reigns. And there's a big question, does he lose it this year? And if so, when and to whom? And I'm going to go bold, or slightly bold, and I'm going to say Roman does drop it at WrestleMania 40 to the American Nightmare, Cody Rhodes.
I back that. I'd love to see that. And I think you and I have also discussed that Cody getting to that top of the mountain doesn't need to be and likely won't be for very long. He won't have like a 9 month reign like Seth Rollins has had. So he'll soon after that drop the belt. Obviously in an ordinary way. We don't know quite how the booking will work out. However, I have two names to pose as people who might potentially follow after him. One is Sami Zayn. I think he's been touted very much so. It's fallen a little bit off out of focus because of his injury break, but I would love to see Sami Zayn being world champion next year. He's another shout that actually could go for the world heavyweight title as well. So
He is.
he's an either or. And then likewise another either or, but I think more likely just for the poetry of it for the universal side, I'm going to say Jey Uso because he's just had such a meteoric rise. It would be just wonderful for him, albeit asymmetrical because he's a twin, but it would be wonderful for him to become world champion in 2024.
Well, I like both of those shouts. It's been a long time in WWE where it feels like a lot of people are primed and ready for that opportunity.
They're right on the cusp. They're ready
Yeah.
for the rocket to be strapped to them. I agree.
All right. Well, let's go on to another dominant champion to discuss our prediction on who beats Gunter, the IC champion. And again, this one I I'm really not certain, but I do have a bit of a unique take, and that is I think Sheamus will beat Gunter, and it's going to take place on a UK episode of SmackDown or Raw.
Interesting. Okay. That's a good shout. I'm not going to disagree with you there. However, I'm going to throw two names into the mix. One for record reasons, and that would be The Miz. But because he's already had his run, I'm going to go and focus a little bit more on the other prediction, Solo Sikoa. I think that would be an awesome way to, because essentially when you end a long reign, it's kind of like putting a brick wall in front of that reign and kind of cutting off all that momentum. And if it's been a good reign, you say that's okay because the big smack into the wall is going to be it's going to have like these massive vibrations and it's just going to be a massive moment. However, in this one, I feel like you take that running car that is Gunter from the Autobahn and you put an elevated ramp at the end, which is Solo Sokoa, and it just kind of takes all that momentum and keeps it rolling. So I think it would be an excellent call. And I think also that their wrestling style, because they have similar body shapes, could really complement each other with the strikes, heavy hitting, just like a really gritty affair. I think that would be an awesome match to see.
I like that. I really do. And I think that would be an excellent option as well. Okay, well, the next category I've got is breakout star. And I didn't really think about this a lot until a couple hours ago, but it kind of clicked for me. And I think the breakout star is going to be a combination of Anna Jay with Jack Perry. I think those two are really going to come
Hmm.
into their own this year and they're really going to gel together. And I think they're going to pair them up finally and just let them be badass heels together.
That's a good shout. I would actually be interested to see that. And my prediction is it's going to be on the WWE side, so it's not gonna step on the toes of yours. My one is I think that we're going to have the main roster breakout of Carmelo Hayes.
Yeah.
I think that we saw that match against Kevin Owens. He gave a massive shout out to Kevin Owens on social media as well. So it shows that he's, rubbing shoulders with the main event roster or the main roster. And I think that one is going to be the one. Potentially also Bron Breakker. I'm looking at NXT for where we're gonna see the breakout, frankly.
I had Carmelo Hayes on my list as well. Like
Okay.
I
Yeah.
really I vibe with that a lot actually. I do think he's gonna really step into his own this year and really show the whole WWE what he's about.
Yeah.
Okay, this one is very vague. It's open to interpretation, and I've got it as biggest prediction for this year. Now you can interpret this in any way you want. I'm going to set the bar for what my biggest prediction, and it's a combination of a couple factors, and it's this. CM Punk will win the Royal Rumble. He will face Seth Rollins in the main event of night one of WrestleMania 40, win the title, and immediately be cashed in on Damian Priest
Oh.
successfully. So night one closes with Damian Priest holding the World Heavyweight Championship.
As a CM Punk fan, that just kind of it really makes me want to grind my teeth, but that's exactly what you want, right? Like you want to see stuff like that happening. That would be definitely a big heist of the century. Um, yeah, borrowing off from Seth Rollins, having done the same thing. It's in the main event. You want to be booing Damian Priest because Punk's going to be a babyface in that matchup. That's a very good prediction. Let me throw another one your way. My
Please.
one's on the AEW side. Let's take that Swerve Strickland is the world champion going into All In, and he's in a three-way against Wardlow, who is being managed by Adam Cole, and also the hometown or the home country hero Will Ospreay. The entire crowd is going to be backing Ospreay, of course, because the other two are going to be heels. And Wardlow has made a promise to surrender the world championship a la Andre the Giant to Adam Cole as soon as he wins it. However, after a 7-ish month absence in the finish of the match, that is where MJF makes his return, screws Wardlow, and then Will Ospreay is going to get the pin and become the world champion. But meanwhile, in parallel to that, we're going to be having that face off of MJF and Adam Cole for the first time seeing each other since the betrayal in December. And they will be seeing each other for the first time again in London after last year's 2023 All In, potentially setting up that long term booking for them to go at it one last time or one more time in 2025. There is my enormous prediction.
Well, I love it, and I'd be curious to see it happen. And I, it's not even something that's completely out of the realm of possibility either, in my opinion. Like it could work that way. We'll see for one, MJF is hurt enough to stay out for 7 months,
Huh.
or and two, if not, if there's the patience to hold off on his return. Because I think waiting that long would really build the anticipations that when he finally does, it'll be perfect.
I'll give you a separate one that is not consistent with that one, though. And this one goes across. MJF goes to WWE in 2024.
Wow.
What do you think?
I think both of those predictions are gargantuan,
Gargantuan.
but I love them. And I honestly, I would pay good money to see either of them happen.
Indeed.
Okay. Well, that takes us into the final category I have, and that is who do you think will be the MVP of wrestling in 2024?
Do you want to take us first, Dimitri?
I'll take the lead here. I've written some names, and I'm not
Mm-hmm.
going to say all of them just yet, but I definitely think there's a lot of options here. But I eventually settled on Cody Rhodes.
Okay.
I think that when he finally wins the title, he's going to have some great matches even after that. And I think it's just that moment alone will really resonate as like one of the all-time WrestleMania moments. And I think it's going to be up there with when Daniel Bryan won it back in WrestleMania 30, like that type of satisfaction,
Wow.
collective
Okay.
satisfaction
Yeah.
amongst the wrestling fan base. And I just think that if he keeps up the level of work he's been producing in 2022 and 2023, there's no reason why he can't also have another great year in 2024.
Hmm.
But I do think he has stiff competition. But I'm going to throw to you first to see if you name the person I also think is in the mix for this.
Well, I actually had a few names, so mine was going to be a bit of an anticlimax. But the names that I want to put forward are going to be Sami Zayn, Kevin Owens. I did want to put Cody Rhodes forward as well, and Seth Rollins, but I also wanted to put forward CM Punk, mostly because I think Punk's got a lot to prove this year, as far as his in-ring style. He knows his worth as a main eventer, and as a draw, that's been proven. But I do think that in general, CM Punk could be topping that list of the PWI 500 around 2024.
I'm going to throw one more name in the mix, and I think he's going to be almost like the work rate MVP of the year, and that's Will Ospreay. I think
Mm.
that in his first year, where he kind of has a very consistent run on American television, I think he's really going to show to a lot of people, including people like me, because I've only seen a handful of Ospreay matches. I've not seen his entire body of work. From what I have seen, what I have glimpsed from, it does seem like this guy is the real deal, and I think he's really going to show off his abilities this year. Well, Thanasi, these are some very fascinating predictions. I'm actually really happy we had this discussion, and I'm looking forward to reflecting on this
Mm.
next year just to
This
see
time next year, that's
how
right.
things pan out. But that brings us to the end of this week's edition of the Audible Finish. Next week, we will be reviewing the standard episodes of programming as everything goes back to normal heading into the new year.
Yeah.
And in WWE especially, we're looking forward to seeing how things develop leading into the Royal Rumble, which is arguably the most exciting pay-per-view WWE has.
A lot of possibilities. A lot of stuff could happen.
Don't worry, when we get closer to the show, we're going to give our own predictions of what's going to happen there. But Thanasi, great to have your company as always.
Thanks for having me and Happy New Year.
And thank you to everyone for tuning in into the first episode of the new year. And until next time, we hope everything you do is just too sweet.